Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And we are right now on our next panel discussion, which is on theme analytics and the digital consumer leveraging your marketing data. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by our panelists. First up, Mr. Tanush Kumar, General Manager, Lead Digital Transformation, Godrej Agrovet Limited. Tanush, being a technology enthusiast with work experience across digital transformation, digital strategy, and project management roles, he's somebody who's led large cross functional teams on digital initiatives in smart manufacturing, sales and marketing, advanced analytics, and customer experience. We also have Mr. Sharat Somani, leader, digital go to market, Southeast Asia and South Asia Western Union Services India Private Limited. Sharath is somebody who has a good understanding of marketing technology and the ad tech landscape, having worked in 4 continents, handling roles in technology, telecom, and financial services space in both B2B and B2C setting in the last 15 plus years. We also have Ms. Sapna Desai, Head Marketing and Online Business, Manipal Cigna Health Insurance Company Limited. Sapna has rich experience in all aspects of direct, mass, and digital marketing, besides having managed some of the largest and respected brands. We also have Mr. Prashant Avasti, Marketing Head, CRM Silk Mills Limited. Prashant, being a proactive marketing evangelist, having an experience of more than a decade in marketing and brand management with renowned organizations. We also have Ms. Ritu Mittal, Head of Marketing and Digital Bayer India. Ritu is somebody who is a passionate brand builder with an experienced business leader with 16 plus years of industry experience. And ladies and gentlemen, this entire conversation is going to be moderated by our moderator, Mr. Aditya Pati, the founder and CEO of First Hive. While Aditya is a serial technology entrepreneur solving problems for marketeers, he's somebody who's mentored many aspiring entrepreneurs, technology, and business management students. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with this, since we are short of time, we've already delayed a little. We'd now request our moderator, Aditya, to take forward the reins of his panel. And if any of our viewers, if any of our attendees have any questions, please feel free to type it in the Q&A tab. With this, I'll pass it on to you, Aditya. Over to you.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Bhavna. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a good session. Like Bhavna said, I'm the founder CEO of First Hive. We are a customer data platform and very excited to be here doing a panel on data analytics and marketing, which is the sweet spot that we understand, probably one of the few sweet spots that we understand. If you look at the last 20, 30 years, we've moved as marketeers from billboards and full page ads to segmented marketing using surrogates to using third-party data for ads and so on. And marketing has seen a tremendous evolution and marketers have had to keep pace with that. While all of that was happening, the tooling that we had as marketers went from in a way, Five Blind Men and the Elephant, where different tools did not know what was happening in different channels, to tools like a CDP, which now start connecting everything. And while all of that was happening, consumers have evolved. Today, the consumer is constantly on, is 24/7 on digital channels. Is there really a true offline anymore with what we are seeing in the consumer behavior and so on? Now, all of this essentially comes down to some fundamental questions in terms of how a marketeer can still make sure that they're able to differentiate and capture attention from the consumer. How do you then capitalize on all of the potential data that a consumer is giving to you to continue to make sense and be able to stay relevant to the consumer in the choices that they're making. And I'm really excited that today we have a very, very esteemed panel of industry leaders coming in from, again, a very interesting set of industries, each one having a perspective on how consumer behaviors have evolved. Without further ado, let me actually request each of the panel members to start off with maybe like a quick introduction. And if you could, in the interest of time, along with your introduction, if you could start with maybe one interesting anecdote that you want to share or an episode where in your long marketing careers, where you really saw or you started becoming aware of the power of data in marketing. So, I'll leave it to you to start. Maybe Tanuj, would you like to start? Tanuj, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks Aditya for the brief introduction and pleasure to be part of this panel. Today, the consumer is the big boss. The consumer decides where he or she wants to buy a product, and companies spend an enormous amount of time deciding between offline, online, where should we catch the consumer. But believe me, the consumer will be able to get to your product sometimes online, sometimes offline, sometimes both, sometimes some other third channel. So in my experience, I have seen that the last year, especially the lockdown, the consumer has been changing habits uh, as and when they want to do it. And as company, we have to be omnipresent, that is be available everywhere to be able to catch the consumer, be it any industry. So I will just keep it brief because we have a long session coming up, and I'll let the other speakers add to it.
Sure. Ritu, would you like to go next? You've had a really interesting career spanning some very exciting brands that you've been part of. When was the moment that you discovered this, this power of data in marketing?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Aditya. I think I've had some very interesting experiences with data. I, of course, started with very conventional form of marketing. And as a marketer, one of the things that doesn't work for you is that usually you're always trying to force consumers to watch your content. In a conventional TV mode, people are usually skipping or wanting. In fact, my own father would switch the channel when there's an advertising, and I really hate that. I tell him that we put in so much of effort to make this stuff, and you really want to just skip it. I think to me, in one of the episodes when I was working on a campaign to drive relevance for the brand with young Indians. And we developed this whole movement marketing campaign for the brand. The biggest realization for me was that data has the power to really really help you become a part of the life of the consumer, part of their conversations. It has the power to help the brand identify the relevance in the life of the consumer in a way that you no longer have to be forced, that you no longer have to force them to watch your content. And multiple episodes to me have proven that when you are not forcing them to watch your content as a manufacturer, but when you're talking to them as a brand who has a heart and a soul and wants to become a part of their life in a relevant way, when they are also interested in some way, whether it's your category or it's because of the life insight that you're using. And data has really the power that with the help of data analysis, the brand can identify those moments when you can be a part of the cultural fabric of the society in a relevant way. And I think that is where I think is the biggest power of data, because that creates a win-win situation for the brands and for the consumers.
True. No, that's really well put. I think a lot of us, especially in the last few years, have gone through those moments where pre-data and post-data, you can see that substantial impact on engagement, transactions, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sharad, would you like to go next? Your moment where you discovered this.
Sure, Aditya. So, I mean, to be honest, I can't remember one a particular moment when it happened, right? But I mean, in the context where we live in, and in a company where I've been working for last, I would say 7 to 8 years, the data is what we live with every day. I mean, the transactions and the principle that moves between the countries, or I mean, in e-com equivalent is a GMV, which we used to call, I mean, principle from long time, maybe 170 years since Western Union has been around, right? So those are like something which are ingrained into our minds. I mean, that's how the street looks at our performance. I mean, how many transactions that we moved between one country to other, or domestically as well, right? So there are instance after instance, but this is one instance which I remember very well, because this is with something which happened when I had just joined Western Union. So this was one of our, I would say, countries in the southeastern country, Malaysia to be specific. I mean, what we saw over a period of 2 to 3 months essentially is that while our transactions were growing, but our principal and revenue wasn't. Right, and there are the obvious. I mean, when you start looking at such kind of data, I mean, such kind of numbers, you would think if you have done any pricing, because of which this may have happened. But of course, I mean, we haven't done any pricing when then we started digging deeper into it. But again, looking at a cursory level, I mean, nothing seems to make sense until we started to look at the consumer segments, essentially. The consumers who are sending, let's say, less than 200 riyal, 200 ringgit, in between 200 to 500 ringgit, and then 500 to 1000 ringgit, and so on and so forth, is when we discovered that for all, I mean, every single segment except for the topmost segment, 1000 ringgit and above, is where we saw a massive decline in our transactions, while in absolute number terms, the decline was very small, but it impacted our principal and revenue, I would say, to a large extent, because these were the people who were sending the most money. While absolute number wise, they were a small part of the overall consumer segment, but in terms of the overall principal revenue.
Uh, can I ask the Kamikaze team to please mute? There's a little bit of a background.
Absolute number-wise, they were a small part of the overall consumer segment. But in some
I heard the first panel dodged Murphy, but looks like he caught up. All right.
All right, finally.
Yes.
Back to our panel from a different panel.
Yes.
All together. So yeah, I mean, all the time I was saying was that what we discovered essentially is that it's the set of consumers who were sending money of higher principal is what was not transacting with us, and then that's we discovered is that it was happening because one of our agent networks was pushing them to use their own channels or their rails instead of using the Western Union rails, right? And why? I mean, while they were pushing the consumers also, I mean, were interested in doing it because that was the time when people started moving to sending money directly into a bank account. And at that point of time, Western Union in Malaysia didn't had that product, right? That was, I would say, a kind of awakening call for us, a wake up call for us, is when we started working on that product to ensure that, I mean, this consumers who were no longer interested in transferring money in cash to cash, were interested in sending money to a bank account, also have a reason to continue and stay with us.
No, interesting, fascinating example of the product gap being called out from the data that you saw. Sapna, how about your experience? I mean, in terms of if I understood your experience, that you've looked at the spectrums across creative, data, marketing, and so on. So how do you see that shift in the context of data?
Yeah, hi Aditya. Thanks for that, and a warm welcome to everyone on this panel. So Aditya, really for me, I would say, when you say marketing is an art and a science, I think I would have started it very much. I started my career with Ogilvy Advertising, in creative and planning and strategy. For a long period of time, that was, how you kind of looked at marketing. So definitely started as an art, consumer segments, but yes, more from a, profiling point of view, more from psychographic, consumer insights, again, from an understanding point of view. I would say the last decade, and it's been accelerated in the last 5 years or 4 years, especially in my role, in my current role, where I head, marketing and digital sales at Manipal Cigna. It's a health insurance company. We move towards the science and the mathematics of marketing. And again, I think as Sharad said, no specific instant, but I would say, it probably started a lot when, our shareholders were really, what we realized what mattered was the profitability and the cost per sale. And the moment those are the parameters you're going for, then you start talking about the quality of consumers. So, the quality of consumers, then you need to figure out which cohort is the cohort that will stay with you for a longer time. So not only the cost of onboarding the customer, but which is the customer more likely to stay with us over a period of time, be more profitable, from a customer lifetime value. So those were the asks that were asked, from the team, and that's when you started really looking at it. That how do you define which is the customer you want to go for, and that's where data started being very important, and then it started influencing a lot of work that we are doing, and we continue to do. I mean, it's an evolution, but I think that's one point. The other thing that I would like to just kind of end with, that in our world today, the cost of acquisition for the cost of retention is a better model than a cost of acquiring a new customer. So again, becomes very, very important. And the whole aspect of cross sell, resell, so all those elements really kind of make you look at data very central to your marketing strategies. So I would say that is the evolution.
Yeah. Prashant, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Aditya. Welcome, everyone. So, like this well-studied panel, my experience also, have diversified experiences. So, right from IT to retail to healthcare and now fashion, I've encountered several events and incident where understood the importance of data. However, I've been advocate of customer centricity, and throughout, every decision was taken on data always, especially in retail. However, I could recall one incident which was an eye opener for me, and this happened during my last stint with the healthcare industry. So, one fine day we were sitting in a room with MD and other stakeholders when we realized that brand connect and brand affinity is deteriorating. So we couldn't understand what could be the reason for it. We are doing all fancy things in the world like NPS, customer effort score, talking to the customer, taking their regular feedback. During all this process, we just forgot one essential thing, that is customer's voice. And that day we decided, let's crack this. What is the problem? So we got in touch with other departments also. We got hold of data science team, and we asked them to do word cloud analysis and sentiment analysis of the customer feedback they must have gotten. They did that, and after a month they came back with an interesting insight. They said, while you guys are communicating about your reach, you're communicating about 8,000 consultation per day, treating customers, approaching customers or patient in more than 1,800 towns. However, you are not getting to one word, which is relief. Yeah. So most of 75% of the customer, whether in negative or positive feedback, they talked about this word relief. So then we realized that, yeah, we actually missed out on this point, and we rejigged the whole thing. Then our brand promise, we included that relief percentage, customer testimony, and all. And then we realized that actually 6 months after doing that, the brand affinity became stronger. The bond with the brand and brand connect was evident, hence better number. So yeah, that was one incident that I could recall. It is not just about importance of data, but it also talks about how relevant data centralization is, how important is data integration.
True. No, that's I think that brings out a really interesting point, which is data for the sake of data is in itself not meaningful. It eventually it has to be context, and how do you really embed the context into that? In fact, when I started off, one of my favorite examples in my company that I give is from my Procter days, when I say, When you see let's say a Gillette razor on the aisle of a store, the razor says, "I'm a great product, buy me," to everybody who walks the aisle, correct? Just as any other brand would. But I always used to wonder, is like, what if it could say, "Hey, Aditya, welcome back. It's the 25th anniversary of your first shave," right? So what is a broadcast message suddenly translates into a conversation with context with the brand and your interaction with the brand. So, and that is really the bridge that a lot of us are, really trying to, cross and get to. So one of the common refrains though, when today as marketers, I'm sure you probably face it as well, or you probably wonder about it as well, is the consumers today are battered with so much of communication, right? They're constantly being pinged, and therefore people say that, look, the attention spans have gone down. But there was this really interesting article which said, and this is true of a lot of behavior that I'm sure you yourself demonstrated, that you want to catch your favorite OTT series, you'll probably do a complete overnight catching 10 episodes of it. But so is the consumer really having an attention span deficit, or have the consumers become more discerning to what's not relevant? And therefore, the value of the hook and the value of context has dramatically increased. I'd love your views. So, Ritu, you've been in the CPG world, extremely contextual. You've spoken about this ad flipping that most of us do. How do you see this? I mean, is it really lack of attention, or is it, lot more discerning? The thresholds have gone much higher on the relevance count.
I would not say that they're not confused, or it's not that they don't know what they want. I think the consumer today is extremely smart. You're right. They have become really, really discerning. They know what they want. They're very clear about what my needs are. It's My attention is there when I really want it. So like you talked about the web series, right? So when I am really interested, I have all my attention for it. If the content is good, I think there is a lot more understanding or of what I like, what I don't like, versus I'll give you the classic example of, again, when our parents used to watch TV, it was more of, I will watch the content that is being shown on the TV, versus we today go and search for the content that we want to watch versus what a channel is showing or broadcasting at a particular point of time. So we are more choiceful in what we want versus what is being shown to us. And we go looking for what we want, and then all our attention is there. And that is why I talked about the whole relevance aspect. Today, with the help of data, we can identify who we want to talk to, and the who we want to talk to is become so different versus what it was a few years back. A few years back, we would have just defined it as a demographic audience of, I want to talk to the households in the 25 to 45-year-old age group in blah, 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 NCCS, right? That's how we would define it. That's the segmentation that we talked about. But today, when a brand is defining who they want to talk to, they can be so much more targeted and specific. And by targeted, I don't mean reducing the number of people that you want to talk to. Even when you take the behavioral aspects of what kind of content are they watching, what are they searching for, are they people who scroll the content, are they gamers, are they mobile junkies, or are they web series watchers? What are their interests, and how does it connect to your brand? I think, and you also touched upon this aspect of there is a lot of data, but you need to know the context in which you need the data. So it's very important to start with that. You as a brand, who do you identify as the right cohort for yourself, or a set of cohorts? And that's where I think the consumers today need to be targeted, leveraging data in the best possible way. They are not confused. They have become a lot more smarter, and we need to respect and acknowledge that smartness and be smart as a brand in reaching out to them.
So, let me switch to a completely different industry from, let's say, CPG. to agri, right? It's a very, very niche industry in that sense. And when I say niche, it's not your typical popular, visible, consumerish kind of a thing. You must be dealing with a lot of different stakeholders, Tanuj, as part of your agrovet business. Very different stakeholders. The challenges could be one of distribution, communication, maybe lesser noise than some of the other brands have to deal with, but the complexities nevertheless. How do you deal with this problem there of getting that attention from your consumer?
Yeah. I will just add on to what Ritu said. So we are primarily an agri input company. So we are providing pesticides and crop protection products to the farmers. Now today, if you think about it, more than 50% of India's people are employed in agriculture sector. So, and almost, I could say almost 60 to 70% of them today have a smartphone. So gone are those days when we would say that we are ahead and they are behind. They are ahead of us. And they are far more intelligent, by the way. So today, they would go and talk to the distributor. They would also go online and check all the products of all the competition, then go back to the distributor and act as if they don't know anything and get more information. And then they will decide whether they want to buy online, offline, mix. So, so I don't think they're confused. It's just that technology has empowered them so much that they want to have the best product at the least pricing, and they want free information as much as they want from the organizations that are pitching to them. So what I feel is that as organizations, we need to stay close to them, both through the physical channel as well as through the digital channel, and ensure that we are they remember us every day, because the moment you stay away from them, they will jump on to some other organization. So that's just my learning over the last few years, that while we talk about online coming all over, but this sector, it's going to be both online and offline that will stay.
On the online offline thing, Prashant, the fashion industry that you're part of is probably one of those very, very interesting industries that's truly operating at that intersection of offline and online, because it's a physical product that you wear, that you try on in the traditional purchase cycle, but then suddenly you have this entire fashion retail piece that's taking off, and people never thought you would click and buy stuff which you have to touch and feel, and which are all about making you look good. But with the advent of a lot of this AI that's coming in try-on technologies and so on, what is your how do you keep pace with the consumer and stay relevant in probably one of the fastest, most complex industry in that sense, in fashion retail?
Yeah, so my take on this, Aditya, as you rightly said, now we will have to merge this offline and online because customer is everywhere. And thanks to this, unfortunately, thanks to this COVID, that the evolution of technology has become faster. So you see, as you rightly said, fashion industry, our way of distribution or communication, it was more of traditional. But with the evolution of technology, I would say customer is well informed. They have more choices. At the moment of their finger, they could get all the information available in the world. Gone are those days, as Tanuj was rightly saying, when people used to walk to Walmart and pick a product of their choice. So now this whole chain has shifted from what to why, where, and when. So now customer, the choices now are not limited to a store where the customer has to choose, from lot of 5 denims or 10 formal shirts. Customer is now exploring things online also. So for us, it is important, as world has been vocal about omni-channel. Omni-channel, I don't know how practical this is, but then multi-channel is what to focus on. So wherever your customer is, as I was talking previously on the same thing, customer centricity is important. So if customer is coming to your store, give him those choices. Customer is shopping online, provide him that range, that choices. So touch him through different customer touch points, be it offline or online.
Thanks, Prashant. That's interesting. But you know what? There was an interesting thing that you said, which is, you know, omni-channel or whatever that is, and then multi-channel, right? I think that is again another reality of all of us as marketeers, right? I mean, we live in a world which is full of TLAs and jargons and CACs and CTCs and whatever, like click-throughs and this and that, right? I want to ask all of you, right? What are one or two of those terms that that really bug you when you hear that, or you know, that you believe have been really abused as words, and then going from there, you know, how do you really kind of sift through all of this, and as you look at tools or as you look at objectives, and really try and bring it down to Mother Earth, if you can call it that, right? To deliver tangible impact for you as part of marketing. So what are true jargons that really bug you, and what are those things that truly are meaningful for you as a marketeer in terms of what makes sense? You know, Sapna, I want to start with you. You've seen the entire kind of, the breadth of all the different things, right from the agency standpoint, where you may have been a culprit on that side, where, you know, like products like us, which throw jargons at customers, to now being on the hot seat there, where you're the recipient of a lot of these jargons. So let me start with you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Aditya. And, you know, I don't want to kind of make anybody feel terrible about this, but so true. You know, I would say that, you know, when we have jargons, and there are two aspects to it. You know, one is the moment I say CPL, or I say, you know, cost per click, cost per impression, there is some, you know, same level of understanding that everybody in this room might have. Now, you know, we all assume that we've all got it, right? We understand it completely. So, you know, when you're talking to me, Aditya, and you're talking about some terminology, or I'm making a pitch, if, as you said, on the other side, I'm assuming I'm saying these words because I'm trying to demonstrate that I know the sector, I know the market, I've been doing this for so long, you know, and then nobody asks any questions, right? I mean, because, you know, jargons have that thing that, okay, fine, if I ask a question or I question it, you know, am I kind of, you know, being silly about it? Is this the right way to look at it? I think that's the first step, because I have always believed that, you know, let's kind of spell out what exactly, from a consumer point of view, business point of view, you know, what is this doing for me? I think we need to be brave enough to question jargons. I think it requires courage to say, you know, break it down for me. You know, I'm not getting it. You know, just break it down. And I think over a period of time, you know, I'm very comfortable doing that. You know, and then you realize that the person on the other side hasn't got it either. maybe, and then you know, then the conversation starts flowing to, okay, fine, what's it going to do for my business? Because
get brass tacks, right?
Yeah. Get you know, yeah. How is it going to affect my consumer? How is it going to affect my business? I mean, though, that's what I'm dealing with. So I think that's really the way I see it. I think jargons are good because it kind of gets us on a common understanding, and you don't have to kind of, but you need to question the jargon, you know, and you need to call it out, you know, where you have to, and probably requires some amount of courage and experience to do that. So yeah, but yeah, data brings with it interesting jargons.
True. Ritu, you would have been you know, at the receiving end of a lot of such interesting pitches at P&G and now. So your take on that, right?
Yeah, no. So I actually completely agree with Sapna. I was brought up in Procter, where we had like so many jargons and TLAs that after 11 years, when I moved to Bayer, I thought I had learned enough, only to identify that there were more to know. But I think, and very, very fresh conversation. I was just having a conversation with somebody on advertising testing in Bayer. And somebody talked to me a format called Stylomatic. Now, I had heard of Narromatics and Animatics, but this was another new one for me. So I think there'll always be new ones. I completely agree with Sapna. I think the most important aspect is that we just need to not be overwhelmed by these jargons, and be very open when you don't know what you don't know. like I was once working on this whole campaign where we were monitoring the conversations that consumers are making on social media, identifying which conversations you want to be a part of. And somebody talked to me of a sentiment ratio. Now, if I don't ask about it, I can, of course, make an estimation in my head of whatever it means. But I think the power lies in being open, asking, and that's when you understand it well, whether you remember it for later or not, but at least in that context you know the meaning. So I think my take on jargons always is that please be very open, understand, ask the question, and understand what it means really from a consumer standpoint.
Right. Sharad, in the financial industry, right? How have you been dealing with this? And you know, where does the kind of the disconnect happen between some of the jargons that get used versus what really matters?
Yeah, I guess to me, I mean it's always, I mean it's something we need to live with, like, and like both Sapna and Ritu said, it's a common language that I mean brings us at par with what everyone else in the industry is talking about. And then when you work in a cross-country, cultural environment, I think at times it becomes a common language for all of us to know, I mean, where we are. But at the same time, I think it's always important, I mean, in typically in this world which is digital, right? And typically in a digital marketing world where like there's so many jargon, that's important to focus on, I would say, uh, three things at a time, and whichever matters to you at that point of time. I mean, if I take our example, last year was only about acquisition. I mean, to us, cost didn't matter. So all that matter was that, I mean, how many more consumers we can get to our site, get them registered, verified, and do a transaction with us. So that was the key. I would say, I mean, key element for us. But I mean, getting into 2021 when the COVID acceleration is slowly, I mean, tapering off, right? It's now about marketing efficiencies, right? I mean, how do you get that customer, but at a lower cost, right? So it's back to ROS. I'm using again another jargon, but like the point being that focus on one which matters the most, right? And I got reminded of when Ritu was talking about Stylomatic, right? So we even in our context, I mean, even beyond animatics and Stylomatics, I mean, just before that is about to be launched, we do something which is called as a brain juicer testing. I mean, where you actually get your actual ad to be shown to people, and the people selected are, I mean, selected in a way that they adequately represent your consumer segments and all. And then this particular software called Brain Juicer will then map the facial expressions of the consumer and then tell you. And again, in terms of hundreds of jargon, system one parameter, system two parameters, what worked, what didn't work, right? So, but what matters at the end of the day is, I mean, if before launching this ad in the marketplace, right, what is it, if at all, I need to change, right? I mean, leave apart all the technicality of it, right? But tell me what needs to change, right? So it's good to know it, but at the end of the day, what matters is what they want to tell us, right? Rather than, I mean, the actual meaning of that particular parameter. I think let's look at the spirit of it rather than being, I mean, dragged down by so many jargons and so many technicalities around them.
You know, reminds me when we were building our product, we, you know, internally, we obviously as a young startup product company, we would always like, we have to have cool names and cool jargons, right? So we called our project God, you know, so GAWD. We still had to be technical, but we still had to be cool. So we call it a GAWD God, which, and you know, which translated into good analyzer of white data. If somebody is an electronics guy out there, you'll know what we meant, right? Cool. So let me get to, I think, one of the other you know, very common and you know, important questions that all of us have to deal with today, which is data privacy, right? And this is the reality. Anytime you talk about data marketing, you cannot be too far away from data privacy regulations and all of that. So I'd love to ask you in terms of, you know, how do you see that evolution impacting choices that you're making? I mean, whether it's let's say regulations like GDPR or PDPA or India's own privacy bill, or for example, the cookie deprecation that's you know, been announced, and all of these things, how do they impact choices that you're making? And are you concerned about it? Are you prepared for it? Is this work in progress? Sapna, would you like to start?
Sure, Aditya. And, as you rightly said, I think this is a very important question, especially being in a BFSI industry, something that, while, from a marketing perspective, we want to look at various projects involving data because to an extent, data allows you to do personalization, for a customer. And I just want to throw one insight here. We did a research and consumers are today more and more okay with sharing data, if it benefits them. So, I don't mind telling you my health statistics, my, facts, if I'm going to get something back in return. So, and similarly, you've seen that behavior even on social media or, everywhere. Consumers are okay with sharing some aspects of their life as long as they know that this is what they're sharing and this is what the benefit it is to them. So that's one part of the coin. Now, the other side of the coin is, how far can you really go with it? How far, and I think that's something that, companies and people working as marketers or, business leaders, we need to be really cognizant of that. Where is the line, in stepping this line of a consumer trust, where the consumer has shared some data with you, basis on some, kind of understanding. As an ethical company, where do you draw that line? I think that's a question, which is always on the table, when you take these decisions. And for me, one simple rule is that the consumer should know what the consumer is sharing, and we should be using, and there should be some kind of a consent and an agreement. And we can't really go beyond that line. So there are various opportunities we've actually let go because it didn't feel right, to kind of look at data from that point of view. So I think again it's evolving, Aditya, but a lot of questions in our own heads on what is it, to what level you should look at this kind of data, especially when you're dealing with sensitive customer data in finance and health. So these are questions I would say would still need to be answered as we move along. Aditya, you're on mute.
Thanks. I think you're making a really, really interesting point, which is, if I have to tie it back to one of the things that Ritu mentioned earlier as well, which is, today all of us are used to having choice in our hand, and we like to be the owners of the exercise of that choice. And while there is the technicality of consent, I think the point that you're also making is there is the morality of what you do with it. It's not just about the technicality of consent, it is the morality of those red lines under which you choose to operate. And we've seen backlash when enterprises have stepped beyond, let's say, what was considered as incorrect, even if they had technical consent or the technical opportunity to do it. And I think so that's a really interesting zone that we are getting into as marketers and interactions with consumers, which in my mind, I think eventually comes down to one very, very important question that all enterprises will have to answer is how do they see themselves in the future and the long term, which is it just transactional relationship, or is it eventually all going to be about trust and recognition that enterprise consumers will do business with companies which deserve trust of the consumers. And Ritu, I know that this is a huge emphasis, for example, in organizations like P&G, where there is constantly this reinforcement of the value and all of that stuff. How do you see this leading to potential evolutions, and how did you see this regulatory or the data privacy piece come in, and what choices you're going to make as a marketer?
Yeah, I think whether it was at P&G and or it is at Bayer, one consistent thing is definitely the integrity, the trust that we talk about for our brands. If I put the data piece into two different aspects, I think one is the whole PII, or the personally identifiable information aspect. On that one, there has been some more work that has already happened. There is more clarity among everyone. What is right? What is wrong? What do you need to do? How do you ensure safety, security, trust for your customers? The other part, which is the information that we as marketers can use to target our consumers better. I think that's what a little bit is in an evolutionary stage and will evolve over a period of time. Now, this part of the information, if I consider two friends and one of them is a brand and the other one is a customer, a very simple and easy to example I'll put. So if I'm a person and I have this friend, I share some information with this friend of mine. This friend of mine further goes and shares this information with another guy who was probably trying to woo me. Now, if this friend of mine did not take a consent from me and shared this information, I will be really angry and this person will lose my trust forever, because I did not want them to share this information further. I shared this information in confidence and that trust is broken. However, if this person took my consent and then shared this information, I would feel much better. Now, again, how was this consent taken? Was this consent taken in a way which was open and transparent, or was it taken in a misleading way in the middle of another conversation? That is also important. So I think we as brands need to make sure.
Morality angle to it, right? It's not the technicality, but the morality of it.
It's the morality. So we as brands, we want to have a relationship with our consumers. And if we want to have that relationship, it is important that we build that trust and confidence that we are, when we have to take a consent, it needs to be in a way which is very transparent. It shouldn't be in a misleading way. It shouldn't be that because you didn't do this, I assumed XYZ. It should not be that. So I think that is very, very important. And if we as marketers and consumers need to leverage this, I think data is win-win for all, but it needs to be used in a way that builds trust between two parties for a longer term relationship versus a transaction where I just leverage somebody for one time. Then that friend is lost forever and you will not have that friend back. So if you want to build a friend, you need to have that trust. And the evolution of how I take a consent, how I collect that data needs to be in a way which is building this trust and not demolishing this trust.
True. Now, one interesting thing that we've seen across marketers is in the last decade or so, the significant increase, let's say, of dependence on second and third party data. And it's only in the, let's say, the recent past that there's a significant recognition of the value of first party data, because that's obviously consent led, it's opt-in, and it's frankly the only differentiating data set that you have as an enterprise, whereas everything else is, let's say, common pool access, right? Everybody leverages. So in the context of regulations, privacy, and trust, Sharad, as a financial services company, how do you see the value of this first party data? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, before I get to the first party data, because see, first party data question is easy to answer, right? In the financial services space, I mean, that is something which is very, very sacred to us, right? I mean, our own legal, at least in our context, would when someone is our own customer, would have done transactions with us, even then, I mean, our legal and compliance would not allow me to reach out to them unless, I mean, they would have opted in for communication. I mean, and not just the communication. I mean, we can't assume that just because they used our service, they intend to receive communication from us as well, right? So, I mean, there are like a lot of those checks and balances already in place, which it do not allow me to even reach out to my own consumer unless and until they have opted in to receive a marketing communication from us, right? The best that we can do is to send them a service message. I mean, and the service message also need not or should not have any word to deal, anything to do, I mean, which the consumer can perceive as a marketing message and all, right? So first party data, I guess, I mean, in larger corporates and enterprises is still not such a big concern. The concern is more on the third party data, right? It's a battle between privacy and personalization is going on. It's 12th today. So it's less than a month since Apple activated their ATT and IDFA, right? I mean, fingers crossed. I mean, to be honest, we haven't seen so much of decline so far as our iOS acquisitions are concerned, right? So, and having said that, I mean, we at this point of time, we haven't done anything. I mean, even the recommendation which Apple gave, right? I mean, even before that pop-up is given to the consumer, you give a soft pop-up before that to the consumer, so that you prepare him to the eventual, I mean, the consent that is allowing us to track him or her on apps outside of our own app as well. I think this again is to me a kind of a workaround to again get into the consumer's mindset and somehow, I mean, forcefully get them and agree to a consent and all right. So I guess it's an evolving space. I mean, do we know the answer? No. So we are taking it at this point of time how it goes. I mean, it's Apple who's already activated it. Google has given a two-year long window with their FLOCs and all coming in. Facebook is integrating their all I would say various identifiers into a single IDFA. So it's I guess, I mean, even the large tech, they are I would say now waking up to this realization that if they don't do it right, I mean, there would be some more platform which is more secure, which would come up. I mean, we have seen what happened, I mean, just a month back between WhatsApp and Telegram, right? And so those things, it can happen. I mean, the consumer's loyalty would change sooner than later if we don't align to those guidelines which are coming over the time. But yes, I mean, as a marketer, I mean, I have to reach to the consumer. Does it mean that I need to reach to the consumer I mean, by breaking all the rules? Not at all, right? Even if Google tells us that they would give us a cohort based approach, I guess we are more than happy to take that approach and see if that means that my cost of acquisition would go up a little bit. That's all right. But not at the cost of, I mean, irritating the consumer, that they stop using us and go to someone else who's ready to align to their wishes.
Right. No, that's great. Thanks. I think that you're reinforcing that whole point of trust and respect, and less interruption and more context and all of that. So one last word from all of you on consumer data analytics marketing. One line, what is your priority if you look ahead into 2021, 2022? What will be your, let's say, one of the top 3 priorities? Pankaj, would you like to start? Sorry, Prashant. My apologies. Prashant, would you like to start?
Yeah. So, my take on this is actually data is nothing but your customer in disguise. So focusing on customer and data is the same thing. And as you rightly said, after the COVID, things have changed drastically. So it is important for us, for all the marketers, to focus on data, because data will not only tell you what is currently happening, but what's going to happen in future. So do predictive analysis, especially I'm talking about fashion industry, where use of data and feedback and customer voice is important. The whole journey of cutting off fabric to selling up ready-made garments to the customer takes around 15 months time. So if customer is telling you that the data is suggesting that in this SS, which is spring summer, the demand of shorts will be reduced and the demand of Capri or 3/4 will be higher. So you'll have to make that product accordingly, and your entire strategy will be revolving around the same.
So your one word would be predictive analysis to make more sense.
Yes, right? Yes.
We are completely out of time. So Ritu, one or two words from you, and Tanuj, after Ritu.
Yeah, I think for me, in the context of COVID, the way self-care has evolved, it's really, really important to understand the consumers better and know what they want and be able to get that for them, whether it is a proposition or it's new innovation. And data is going to play a huge role in whether it is understanding who you want to target, or it is what you want to tell them, or it is what you want to innovate for them. So across these pillars, understanding the consumer, their needs is going to be very, very important in the changing context of self-care in the times of COVID. And that's what the focus should be.
Awesome. Tanuj, I'm getting buzzes, so 10 seconds.
Yeah. 10 seconds. Yeah, so I feel data and analytics is the way forward. But we also need to understand that any models that were created 1 year back may not hold true anymore. So we need to make sure that every couple of months we keep updating our models, because the consumer of yesterday is no more the consumer of today. So that's with that, I think I would park my final thoughts.
Got it. No, thank you very much. I think you guys, all of you have contributed some really interesting points, and hopefully, folks enjoyed this discussion. The way I understand this future is it's all about making sure that it's not just, data is the new oil. All of that is known jargon. I think eventually it's about extraction of insights from the data for making sure you're relevant. And I wish you all the best in your journeys as you take each of your respective brands to greatness. Bhavna, back to you.
Thank you so much, Aditya. Firstly, excellent moderation right there. We got to give you a shout out on that with your expertise. And definitely all our eminent panelists, the fact that you all take out time from your busy schedule to pass on your learnings and sharings, that is what it is all about. Though it is virtual, but still the knowledge continues, the legacy of conversation continues here. On behalf of Kamikaze B2B Media, I'd once again like to thank all of you for joining us. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks so much, Bhav.
Thank you.
Thank you.